Welcome, everyone. I hope you are having a terrific day. I'm Tobin Arthur, the founder and executive chairman of Angel MD. And one of the things that we do at Angel MD, and really one of our focuses and strengths, is connecting folks. And we saw that various different groups and constituents within the ecosystem are doing great things. And what we want to do is spend our time helping each of them do what they do better and connecting them with one another to make this whole environment more efficient. Just quickly, let me read the mission statement for the Alpha Partners. We are connecting innovation hubs, incubators, accelerators, and organizations that support the development, funding, and maturation of early stage healthcare companies. Our goal is to share the resources and help one another build a better ecosystem. And we are really excited about having each of you here today. Now, I want to give a special thanks to Mike Szymanski on our team, who's executive produced this event. It's a big undertaking, and Mike has done an extraordinary amount of work pulling together not only the list of speakers and panelists, but really facilitating the whole concept of the Alpha Partners Summit. Mike is going to be moderating many of our events today. We have speakers that will be coming in and out, so a lot of logistics to happen behind the scenes. For those of you who don't know Mike, he's a career Wall Street veteran. Joined Angel MD. Really, we're very fortunate to have Mike leading both analytics and research for Angel MD, as well as Angel MD Capital. Having somebody with his credentials and background in finance has been fantastic. He attended both MIT and Princeton. He is no slacker. But without further ado, I want to turn the floor over to Mike, who's going to lead us through the sessions today and tomorrow. Mike, welcome, and thanks for taking this on.
Thank you for that generous introduction, Tobin. I appreciate it. And so, yeah, we have a rapid fire opening hour here today. Feel free to fire in Q&A, and I'll know that I'll be able to manage most of them, but our conversations will be a quick series of executive summaries that will then relay back to the content, extended content available on the Alpha Partners website. And I hope you all take advantage of that as much as possible. I'm going to jump right into it with a person that I just met recently, Dr. Jeff Cohen from Allegheny Health Networks. This man is doing some remarkable work revitalizing local community ecosystem by utilizing a otherwise bankrupt suburban hospital system. I think that's going to be as brief as an intro as I can do for such an amazing work that he's doing. So we're just going to jump in and let him speak for himself. Doc, tell me a little bit about how that came about and what exactly you're doing out there in the suburban hospital complex.
So just as a matter of introduction, my name is Joe Macaluso. I just changed body form. That's how I met Michael. I'm a urologist who wears a lot of hats, and I've done a lot of different things. I practiced urology here in Pittsburgh since '85. Have my own startup company, been working on this project for a couple of years. I was president of a quaternary hospital, Allegheny General Hospital, for a couple of years, and during that time frame, I noticed the relationship between poverty and cost of healthcare. And unfortunately, most times we focus on revenue. And background of this is that Pittsburgh went through a huge decline as steel sort of tailed off in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And we went from needing 5,000 to 6,000 people to produce steel to about 250. And there's two sides of disruption. One is the disruption that caused the improvements to make better steel cheaper. The second thing is, what do you do with a population that is disrupted? And those become the steel workers, or the 4,950 people that you don't
And
need.
what did that do to the hospital system's budget?
So basically, when you lose commercial support and the profits that come with commercially insured, you're not able to overcome the losses that you get from day one on the Medicaid population. And you invert the ratio of commercial to Medicaid, and hospitals close. So in Pittsburgh, we lost approximately 10 facilities in the last 10 years. And nationally, over the next 10 years, you're probably going to lose between 500 and another 1,000 hospitals. Now, some of this is just the inevitable changes that are going on in healthcare. But the other thing is the job for the healthcare system is to take care of the patients, and most of them are not for profit. So, if you don't have hospitals and provider systems in place, you've got a real problem. So the question then becomes, what do you do with a closed hospital? And to shut me up, they put me in a hospital, former hospital that closed in 2010. It's 250,000 square feet, and the use of it right now is the emergency room is an urgent care center. There's an integrated medicine practice. and physical therapy, all of those three take up about 18,000 square feet, and the rest of it's empty. So this is a community that was once middle class, is now impoverished. And what we do, we call this a study in disruption. We created an incubator out of the ICU, and the major issue you need to be able to do that is HVAC, which most hospitals have. And the infrastructure needed for life safety equipment allows these buildings to be repurposed. They need some love, they need some attention, they need some paint, somebody to clean out all the crap that's in them. And then it becomes very cheap real estate, because where they exist in the economic scale is that you don't need to make money on these buildings if they're still part of a network. You just need to make sure you don't get in trouble with inurement. So we have approximately 220,000 square feet of space that we can repurpose. And the ICU is going to become Alpha Lab Health, the permanent home. We're now picking our second cohort. So we created this partnership.
Give you an idea, just to give us an idea, when you say that you have these 220,000 square feet of space, on an average cost of what per square foot from a capital cost and maintenance costs?
So the average cost for CAM in a facility like this is probably about $6, $7 a foot. We need to be able to make sure that we don't get in problems with inurement. So if you're a non-for-profit, we can actually discount it. It's $13 a square foot for lab space. It ain't pretty lab space. It's clean. It's better than most professors get, at most universities around here. But it's a place for startup companies to try their ideas, get at least to an MVP. And if they're going to fail, they're going to fail fast. The second thing is that we have a large infrastructure here for robotics and AI. So really what you need is an AI station, a couple of desks, which we've got thousands of. Every hospital does. They sit in warehouses because nobody wants them anymore. And we cleaned up the old patient rooms and made them into basically workspaces. And, once again, to avoid inurement, if you're a for-profit company, we'd have to charge you somewhere around $20 a foot, which includes everything, including parking. We're 6 miles from downtown Pittsburgh. And it gives you a place to start your ideas. If you're part of Alpha Labs, this is our incubator, and you're chosen, you'd be 5% of the companies that we review, we pick it for this incubator. We give them free space afterwards. So the first cohort's graduated. 5 of the 7 companies set up shop here. They get free rent for 5 to 7 months after they graduate from the cohort. And the advantages that we have is that we have great translational expertise with a very large network, Allegheny Health Network. We have about 2,000 consultants, and the definition of an expert is somebody that lives 50 miles away and has his own slides. So in Cleveland, we're experts. Here, Cleveland Clinic is an expert. And the other thing we have is a relationship with Highmark, which, if you want to understand how payers think, and that's really important if you want to get paid, we're very tightly tied to Highmark, which is the parent of Allegheny Health Network, and allowed me to venture out into this.
So let me just go back on a couple of things here. One of the first requirements you need is an old hospital that in a decrepit system, like something that you can pick it up on the cheap, because otherwise it's going to be a mothballed facility anyway. The hospital has amazing bones because they've all been built to standards of healthcare, but why not just revitalize them and put them into service as a frontline unit? If you're going to spend the money, why not utilize it as a frontline hospital?
Well, the cost of repurposing this as a hospital would be enormous. So it's never going to be a hospital again.
But the bones for an innovation hub and for the use of lab space are perfectly reasonable.
So we have e-power, we have plenty of power, we've got life safety equipment that's in here. If necessary, we certainly could house people in here because every patient room has a bathroom. So that's one of our selling points. Not only do you get your office, but you get your own private bathroom. And just one other thing about this is that, we're creating disruption and we're bringing innovation from the outside into the healthcare system.
Right.
And that's really important to start to look at the problems that we face and how are we going to change it.
So you do need Jeff, you do need a healthcare system or a healthcare network that's willing to support an innovation hub in the first place, though. To really
they're a stakeholder in this as well. The other thing is that when we talked before about the poor, the cost of taking care of the poor are at least 50% higher than the same diseases in the commercial population. And we have a kitchen, we've got facilities here, and we're actively engaged in following the PMPM by resolving social determinants of health. So one of the key components of this is we measure it. We have access to data streams both at the county, the state level, and internally with obviously with HIPAA security for charges and records. So we can actually go back and measure the effects of ER admissions and do they reduce, and if you deal with social determinants, how do you demonstrate a decrease in the PMPM? Believe it or not, it's never been shown. And these are intuitive things that if you deal with things like housing, food, transportation, security, education, pillars of the communities, and you start really resolving these, you can start seeing a decrease in the utilization of the component of the healthcare environment, which we lose money on every one of them. And the only way that you're going to break this cost is if you keep them healthy, a novel concept. But that's how you're going to do this.
So we only have time for one more question here because we got to wrap up and move on to our next speaker. This is fast-paced stuff here, folks, and I apologize for that. Jeff, what other benefits do you realize in the community? I mean, I imagine you're retaining talent because now you've got an innovation hub that you can try to keep your best docs in space. You mentioned the aspects of utilizing your kitchen for other things, like you can use this facility for numerous different purposes.
Yeah, so this is a lightning rod, and when you ask what I'm trying to do, is basically change the healthcare system. So the linkage of economics and healthcare outcomes is immutable in my mind. What we're doing is opening the door and allowing entrepreneurs to flourish in this area, which before this they were tightly held within a successful system as UPMC and Pitt. But their models, they have to own everything. So it's great for Pitt and great for UPMC and not great for the region. We're more of the Android model. Pitt is more of the Apple model. So the benefits in the community of people coming to you with their ideas, anybody that runs an incubator knows the majority of ideas are really not going to go anywhere. But you're going to find the ideas that are going to fit, and you can start linking things together. Doctors that are unhappy, nurses that want to do something different, educational facilities within your community that are trying to place PAs. I talk about innovation and innovators. It's a personality defect more than a product or a design. And you solve problems. You're stubborn. You're a pain in the neck. That's my Macaluso imitation. And you're just committed to what you're trying to do. What this does, it becomes a focal point for the community to allow more development within the community, and the effects of that is a rising tide floats all boats.
Great. So just so everyone knows, Dr. Cohen and I have had an opportunity to discuss this topic for well over 2 hours, and I've just barely scratched the surface. We can't possibly deal with this in 10 minutes. But what we are going to do is schedule a few roundtable discussions and some follow-up interviews for anyone that wants to learn more. This is going to be dovetailed uniquely into our Impact Action Conference on November 11th under the category of Innovation Ecosystem, because part of driving innovation is actually making sure your societal support system is healthy and helping using innovation to improve that health. Let's start creating positive feedback loops here, folks, not negative ones. So thanks so much, Doc. With that, I'm going to be moving on to Will Walker, who's speaking next. He is from Hall Venture Partners. He's going to tell us a little bit about opportunity zones and Utah's response to creating positive feedback loops via tax incentives for entrepreneurs and innovation groups. So, Will, tell us a little bit about Hall Venture Partners and how you guys utilize the tax advantage zone that Utah has set up.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Mike, and putting this on. And, the doctor before me just spoke about repurposed property and buildings and things for innovation. And that's really the theme and the thought behind the creation of the 8,900 regions in the United States that are deemed opportunity zones. And they were made for exactly that. And there's no better poster child for that theme or for that initiative and innovation and all that comes with it, and jobs and lots of renovation than Hall Family Office, a 70-year-old family office that's located in a 130-acre Opportunity Zone campus in Provo, Utah. Just a real brief history. I've spent 30 years in private equity, and I've spent about the last 3 or 4 speaking on different aspects of opportunity zones, along with people that you're going to have on later, like Jimmy Atkinson, who's a top opportunity zone expert and speaker. And, Opportunity Zone DB is what he's going to speak about. But regardless, these are really at the forefront of repurposing. In Hall's case, it was an old steel mill. It was actually the largest employer west of the Mississippi way back when, 70 years ago, went defunct. And of course, Tracy Hall, the founder, patriarch of Hall, he was a BYU professor. He invented the man-made diamond back in the 50s and licensed it out. Again, the start of something big, because he had actually worked at Edison Labs years before becoming a professor at BYU.
Sure.
And moonlighting to create this invention. So he wanted to create a modern day Edison Labs, and he really has, I think, accomplished that, because he took this old steel mill over that was defunct and now employs over 770 years, over 750 employees, over 200 full-time scientists and engineers.
So, Will, tell us a little bit about what the Opportunity Zone actually is and how it spurs innovation, or how it spurs this retention of.
Well, the Opportunity Zone was made to give a 5 or 10-year exemption to any companies or projects that were perpetuating growth, jobs, renovation in hard hit or underutilized areas.
And that's a tax benefit in what form? Like,
it's 100% after 10 years on some projects, including real estate, which most people know Opportunity Zones for. It's 100% tax-free after 10 years for profits.
These are capital gains on investors.
Correct. And as we all know, or should be aware of, that there's capital gains now that will most probably go up, not go down in the near future. So these are very timely vehicles that most people should understand and take advantage of and get more education on. And certainly operating companies in that whole format can be used in a 5-year tax exemption under the 1202 exemption, which gives you 100% tax exemption after 5 years in an operating company project that is in an Opportunity Zone and meets the requirements. So I know there's a lot of wide range there, and I employ everyone to really take time to learn more, research, and be glad to speak on any level to help educate the crowd.
So now, how does that benefit the startups themselves in terms of starting up there? You're talking about making more attractive to investors. Are there people that are specifically seeking that out?
Yeah, so using Hall Family Partners, Family Office, and Hall Venture Partners, again, we have over 135 companies on our 130-acre campus, which has all been deemed as an Opportunity Zone. And they are about 100 of those companies are in the startup or incubation phases. About 35 are mature companies, and we've had multiple exits over our 25-year history on those companies. So that's, there's other incubators out there that are forming or have formed in both operating companies and other renovation areas. One of the ones that HUD and EIG uses besides Hall as their poster child is in the city of Baltimore, where they've redeveloped all of Baltimore, downtown Baltimore, many of the hard-hit areas for both jobs and projects, and have really brought that back to life. So they use Baltimore for renovation and real estate. They use Hall for operating companies with multiple exits and job creation.
And so has the community tax base and like the general community benefited from this, or do they report back policymakers? They acknowledge that this has been a positive thing for the local area?
Well, like I say, in Hall's case, we've created over 3.6 million jobs outside of our 750 that we now employ at our old steel mill, which has been repurposed for Hall projects and inside and outside of the Hall campus. But certainly the Opportunity Zone format has really given me and others like me that are kind of leading the charge. Again, Jimmy Atkinson is one, and Ashley Tyson, and I know Tobin and you are also exploring what it can do for Angel MD, because this is really a great format when it fits for investors as well as entities to grow and really take full benefit of all the growth exemptions, I guess you'd say, to get to where they want to go and where investors want them to go.
Excellent. Yeah, and you're right. We at Angel MD have actually been exploring setting up our own unit out of that area in order to take advantage of the tax incentives for investors. I recommend anyone that is interested contact these guys later or network with them after our discussions today, and you can follow up on more information. We also, like all of our speakers today, more information will always be available on that Alpha Partners website under the extensions tab. Currently, it's about filled out around 20% of the way. We're going to make sure that every speaker and every topic gets a full deck of information where you can follow up and track them down or just learn more from some instructional videos. Thanks so much, Will, for your time so far. We will have your Opportunity Zone partner, Jimmy, with us later today, talking about how these things are incentivized from an investor standpoint.
Yeah, and Mike, if I can just add one more thing, I want to just alert your viewers or your audience too. These vehicles can be used for both public and private exits and entities. So there's a lot of different carrots or cherries on top that I encourage everyone to do more homework or get more education for their own project, whether it be in healthcare, social impact, ESG, whatever, as these elements grow and also, like I say, are the darlings of the politicians as well as the investors.
Thanks so much, Will. That's great. Yeah, and to his point, it's great for the startups. It's great for the investors. Definitely something to learn more about. All right, so our next speaker was supposed to be Nathan Nagel, talking about a similar type of program that operates out of the UK. Unfortunately, he's coming in from the UK, and apparently, I don't know, his plane's late or something, because whatever's happened, he isn't logged in yet. So that gives me the great benefit of bringing up Uli Chetapalli, a friend of ours from Innovator MD instead. He's going to change tack a little bit and talk about current trends in artificial intelligence, how that's utilized, and how that changes the landscape for startups and what the really opportunities are for that. So when we talk about AI, one of my pet peeves is that so many things get bucketed under that overall umbrella moniker, and yet they really represent a wide range of different use cases. Could you walk us through the difference between things like machine learning versus pattern recognition versus, say, genetic algorithms or whatever it may be?
Yes, Michael, thank you very much for having me here, and thank you to all the folks that are organizing this Alpha Partners talks. So my background, I'm a physician, emergency physician who has turned into entrepreneurship and innovation right after I finished my clinical practice. So one of the big things I see on the AI scene is that a lot of people are trying to figure out, how to make the current system better. How can we make the appointments better? How can we make the radiology reads better? How can we make, the peripheral part of medicine, I call it. So, and there are different categories, right? You're looking at data, you're looking at genetic data, you're looking at image data, but overall, what you're thinking is that, you can make the system more efficient and you can get more insight and better knowledge, and we can make better decisions. But what I am trying to do, or I'm trying to focus on, is how can AI change, clinical medicine? I'm not talking about how fast you can read an X-ray or how well you can look at, read your genetic code, but I am looking at how can we change the science of medicine? For example, when I say science of medicine is, what I mean is, what we practice today, I think half of it is useless or dangerous for the
half. That's dangerous. That's scary. What are you talking about?
That is scary. And so how do we know that these hundreds of treatments, there are, 65 plus drugs for diabetes? How do you know which one works better for which person? Right?
Yeah.
Are we using the right medicines? Some of these expensive medicines are coming onto the market. For example, the new drug that was, approved for Alzheimer's. And how do you know that it is working? How do you know that?
How do you propose to use AI in order to do that? And what do you mean by using AI in order to solve that problem?
So in order to solve that problem, we need to use real world data. The data that we are collecting in the EHRs, that we are collecting in the claims processing, that we are collecting through everyday life. If you use that data on patients, and then you can easily figure out, well, I say easily, but if Netflix can figure out what I like in a movie, we can figure out what medicine works best for which patient, right?
So
The technology is
Uli, are you suggesting you're that complicated a personality that finding your movie taste is making curing cancer?
Yeah. So the technology is there. The only thing is we are not using it. We're not using it in the right way, and that's one of my big focus. When I wrote the book, Punish the Machine. The machine is there. The tools are there. The software is there. The AI is there, but we are not using it in the right way to solve.
To put a fine point on it, what is the wrong way and what is the right way? What are we doing now that's wrong, and what do we need to change in order to make it right?
So there are several things in the current healthcare system. For example, paying for volume, right? You're paying a doctor to see 20 patients a day, let's say. So people are trying to use AI to figure out how can we see 30 patients a day, right? How can we decrease the cancellations?
Don't use AI for micromanagement. Use it.
Yeah. So micromanaging the same system, which is flawed in the first sense. So instead of doing that, I would say, do you really need to see 20 patients, or do you have to see only 5 patients that will actually make a difference in their healthcare outcomes?
Got it.
Right. So what's the best way to see a patient? Which patient needs to be seen in face-to-face versus which patient needs to just a phone call, or which patient needs actual visit to their home. And so that is what I'm talking about when I say changing the science of medicine, whether it is delivery or actually the research side of it, which is where the biggest bang for the buck is.
Great. Thanks so much. And keeping in pace with our overall incredibly fast pace here. It's a sprint, not a marathon, folks. I do want to say thank you very much, Uli. His book is, what was it? Rage Against the Machine, Uli? What was the name of it?
Punish the Machine.
Punish the Machine. All right. I like mine better, but Punish the Machine it is. More information will be available on our website for you to learn more about that, or you just Google the fellow. I mean, with a name like Chetapali, how can you forget that? I mean, that's right? Just wonderful. Google him, get his stuff, find out what he means. I'm a big fan. Like, I agree. We tend to micromanage as opposed to take on the big problems. So
I would say also check out Innovator MD if you're an innovator and a physician.
That would be the innovator and the MD. Definitely. Check it out if you're just a physician or just an innovator as well. It doesn't have to be both. All exactly. Right. Thanks very much, Uli. With that, we have Logan Plaster coming up next. And he's going to talk to us about why you, basically communicating your commitment, or very importantly, how do you, in a short pitch, how do you get across what's most important to your potential hopeful investor? Logan, tell me a little bit about what you're talking about here. What do you mean?
Yeah. Hey, thanks for having me, Michael. So there's so many resources out there for innovators wanting to improve their pitch, prove how they get across to an investor or a partner. Most of those are written by longtime investors, but I'm a journalist by training, and so I wanted to take a slightly different tack since we have a short amount of time and talk about why I think that some of the core tools of journalism can be used to really connect with investors and partners and prove to them why you deserve their attention. I mean, there are so many things vying for their attention, and I think that there's certain things that we can do that really help. So I'd like to suggest that the same rules that hardened front page newspaper journalists use to decide what goes above the fold or on the homepage can help innovators think through how to break through the noise and really prove to someone that you're worth listening to. So, Michael, that's the idea. Make sense?
Are you suggesting that we should all become clickbait here?
No, I'm suggesting that over the last 100 years of newspaper journalism, that there are 5 basic rules to what makes a story newsworthy, and the same things apply to just about every conversation that I have. I've gotten to speak with maybe 400 founders over the last 3.5 years of startup health, and every conversation, every press release, every pitch needs to have one of these 5 elements.
Got it. So let's go through them quickly. We don't have that much time, but I don't know if
I'm
we
gonna
can
do
get
that.
all 5. Can we get all 5 done?
Yeah, we're going to get all 5 done. Now, the
All
first one, and they may sound simple, but that's what makes them powerful. I use these on a daily basis to filter everything I do through just human nature, okay? The first one is timeliness. The thing that makes news is that it's actually new. So something that happened today is more newsworthy than something that happened yesterday. So when you're framing the challenge that you're dealing with as an entrepreneur, root it in the facts of today. If you're building a tool to fight addiction, don't just talk about the opioid crisis in general, how it affects people over the course of years, but how is it affecting families this month, maybe even today. People have short attention spans. They're more passionate about what's happening closer to them right now. The second rule of newsworthiness is proximity. A car crash that happens on my street is more newsworthy to me than one that happens in another state. So in your pitch, think about the things that tie your story to the person who's listening to it. That could mean geography, understanding where your listener is, but it could also be thinking about people groups and what bonds us together. So think about how we're connected as humans and use that in your storytelling to create proximity with your listener. Third rule of newsworthiness is celebrity or prominence. We care more about the news when it's somebody that we've heard of before. A car crash with the mayor is more newsworthy than a car crash that I'm in. In our pitches, this comes out in how we talk about well-known members of our team, well-known members of our advisory board, well-known partners. This is critical to any pitch. For entrepreneurs, this could be talking about having a founder with multiple exits, partnering with the Mayo Clinic, having an NIH grant. We can't help ourselves. We like prominence, and this gives a story a hook. So obviously name dropping can go too far, but it's important to recognize that anything that lends prominence to your enterprise can be used upfront as a hook. Fourth rule of newsworthiness is impact and significance. So to extend the car crash analogy, a car crash involving a bus is more newsworthy than a bus full of people is more newsworthy than a car with one individual. And so we care about things of greater impact. This is usually a slam dunk for healthcare entrepreneurs but there is a temptation to bury it as well. So my encouragement is to come out swinging with the big global impact of what you're doing. We want to know that millions of people can be helped, millions of dollars can be saved. Can your innovation be used in multiple countries around the globe? How big is your vision? How big can this go if you can succeed? Use that impact and significance piece as a news hook. And then finally, the fifth rule of newsworthiness in any newsroom, from the New York Times down to a rural paper, is human interest. And this is sort of a special class of stories that can break the other rules, but they're the ones that capture our imaginations and our hearts and our feelings. So they appeal to emotion, and this one is absolutely critical for entrepreneurs. A lot of healthcare entrepreneurs have a personal reason to get into the business that they're in. Maybe they have a loved one who has suffered from a disease or has had an addiction, and we can't downplay the importance of this in our storytelling.
It's interesting because I think this is going to be a great bridge to our next speaker, Kathy, because one of the things that I 100% agree with you in terms of the content of the message, but I think you said something earlier, and that was relevance. What was when we were talking about knowing your audience, about what types of things that they're going to really connect with? Because I can tell you that in a 5-minute pitch, I actually don't want the backstory. I want the science. But then that's because I'm an analytic that really is just worrying about the science of the thing. And I'll get to the rest of the story. But if I have 5 minutes, I want to save the backstory for dinner. You know, meaning if I'm having a speed date, I want to know what is it about your company that's uniqueness. So I'm going to highlight that on my stuff.
Michael, I think that might be more you. I mean, I was just speaking with Lee Shapiro from 7 Wire Venture 2 days ago, and he said his number one is who, not what. And so to hear your passion and to understand that you're the person that we're going to connect with, obviously, I guess what I'm saying is a lot of that science has to be table stakes. You got to come with a good business plan and a good product. You got to be able to snap through that. And there's going to be other folks who have that. So do you have the passion that shows that you're going to commit long term and push through when things are hard? And can you hook them? So a lot of these rules are about how to make sure you have the conversation. You get to have that dinner where you can go deeper.
An excellent point. An excellent point, Logan. Thank you very much. So more of that content will be available again under the Startup banner, under the Startup Health, one of our major alpha partners. Under their banner on the website, you'll be able to find a lot of that continuing information, a lot of other material from education, from Startup Health, as well as more from Logan. And now that brings me with a great excitement to bring up Kathy Boncheck. Kathy was one of my communication coaches when I first started working on teaching on Wall Street. So I was a trader for many years. And then all of a sudden I was transitioned into a point where I was expected to go on stage and spend an hour or more educating people on equity derivatives. And that was quite the challenge for me. So it was a really good experience, and Kathy helped me through it. So Kathy, it's not that we have a different take. Like, we both agree with Logan on that.
Yes.
But we would like to talk a little bit about how to make sure your audience is receptive and what it means if they have different personality sets and why you would communicate in slightly different ways. For example, for me, I'm thinking more about the science of it, and yet obviously Logan mentions that many other well-known investors are thinking more about the passion. Why would that be?
I have to say,
are we right? Who's right and wrong here?
I don't think there's a right and wrong. The thing I loved about what Logan just said was he said, "That's you, Mike." And that's my whole point, is if I want people to walk away from this conversation, I want them to think about the who they're talking to, how they're talking to them, and then that will often answer the why that we're there. And I think that what I have to say is absolutely complementary to what Logan's telling you to put into the content of getting people excited about your pitch. What I want people to think about is to spend as much time thinking about who they're talking to. Because what I see all the time in pitches when I work with teams and I work with individuals is this emphasis on the words and the language and the charts and the science and all the things that they know and they love and they spend their time on. But the reality is all of that has to be packaged. I always say it's like you're serving a dinner to someone who you've invited to your home. You want to put that on the plate in a way that entices them and makes them eager to eat that. And so we have to think about, how do people get their information? Knowing you want the science, I'm not going to come in with my personal story. I'm going to go right to the charts and the research that I have. And if I know that someone else is more interested in the impact that I'm going to have as the leader of the team, I'll start with the story and the team and how we got there.
Are there aspects of style that relate to that as well? You're talking about the fact message that you're sending based on the personality set, but there's a style element as well, I would guess.
I think of them as very much intermingled, because the way in which you present has much more impact than we give it credit for. You know, people like to be entertained, people like to be wooed, people like to be listened to and heard. And what I want people to think about and how you change your pitch is, if you've got someone who's a challenger is going to say, "I don't believe you, prove it to me," you go right to battle with them. You say, this is why I know it to be true. And you don't hesitate, because to them, that's proof of concept and proof of your belief in it. You might have someone who
if you want to pitch to me, you go ahead and come that way. So what you're saying basically is the way people pitch naturally, or the way they would communicate naturally, is also the way in which they would be most receptive to receiving that communication. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
We tend to craft our presentations in the way that we want to get them. So left to our own devices, of course, we'll make our messages in the way that we think are exciting and relevant and real. But the trick of being an excellent communicator is to find the entry point to the person you're speaking to. Who's the decision maker? Who's the key influencer on this? What do they need to hear and know? And I want to always find out. I want to create a conversation that allows me to get to their values. Because if I walk in as the expert for this particular science or this project or this thing that we want to bring to the world, I am the expert. I don't have to bring them to the same level of expertise. I have to bring them to a level of trust and excitement and letting me go do my job.
I want to spend more time, but we're following behind. And one of the advantages that we have with Kathy is that she and I have already done a series of interviews that are already currently available on the website. Wonderful stuff, if I have to say so myself, and apparently I do, until you guys tell me it's wonderful. Then I don't have to say it for myself anymore, do I? But seriously, Kathy is really wonderful, thinking about the way to communicate, how to communicate, the aspects of the message versus the messenger. In many ways, when I coached with Kathy, it was not just having a coach, but also a little bit of a therapist, in the sense of getting inside your own head. She's not a licensed therapist. She made me say that even on the video. But about getting inside your own head in terms of knowing how you communicate, your own weaknesses and strengths, and playing to them. So thanks again, Kathy. I very much appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike.
Next up, we've got Jeff Erickson from Carta. And communication and emotion is all about things, but turns out your cap table is saying things behind your back. So what's going on with that, Jeff? What do you mean by your cap table tells something to your investors?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mike. First, I wanted to say I loved what Kathy and Logan were just talking about. Really resonated. So, but when you're presenting to investors, one of the first things that they're going to ask to see is your cap table. And a lot of times investors are thinking, or founders are thinking that, they're just looking at, what, how much equity do I have, and what, who else is on the cap table. There's a lot more that investors are actually looking for when they look at your cap table, and they'll look for things like, what did the last round look like? Did you allow for some, interesting preferences or things like that in the shares that were issued to the previous investors? They'll dig into things like, if they see somebody on the cap table that they like or dislike, that can also play into decisions. If you see certainly an unreputable investor on there, that may throw up some red flags. But then, digging in a little bit deeper, you start to see trends like, you can see when employees have left, if they've got stock options, and did those employees exercise their options? Do you have a whole host of employees that left and then they decided not to exercise when you as an investor are coming in thinking really bullishly about this company, and as an investor you probably want to talk to those folks. Why did you leave? Why did you not exercise your shares if they are in the money? And so there's all kinds of things like that investors can tell about you as a founder and your company. One of the things that we see at Carta is it's something like 80% of all cap tables have errors in them. And so if you look at that from an investor standpoint, you're entrusting this founder or the management team to be stewards of the equity that they're granting to you. And if they can't keep track of their cap table, that can be a red flag. So those are some of the things that I've noticed just from the investor side.
So let me ask you a slightly different question, since we are teaching startups here as well. That is one of the mandates of the Alpha Partners, is to support our startups and educate them going forward. What do you do? Let's say, it's like almost like I want to go out and find a credit support professional, like to clean up my credit report. Like if I'm a founder and I've had like a bad phase or something has happened, I've got an oops on my cap table. Is there something that I can do to clean it up, or am I just saddled with that?
There's always things you can kind of work on. I think the biggest thing, investors want to know the story. So it's not going to necessarily ruin the thing, but you've got to be prepared to talk through it and be concise in terms of here's the situation and address it up front. Don't try and hide anything, because I think a lot of times founders think, oh, well, you can have our cap table, go ahead and look at it. They don't realize how deep the investors will go into that. And they end up talking to Uncle John, who's not doing anything at the company and who owns 10% of the company. Right. So they will dig into things like that. So I just think being prepared. I think the other thing that I would say, Mike, is make sure you have a good startup attorney that they're going to help keep you up to date on things. And I think one of the challenges startup founders run into is they'll let investors put weird things or weird terms into deals that come back to haunt them. And again, that shows up on the cap table and in what the future investors are looking at.
Got it. So lesson number one, get yourself a good lawyer, huh? Like that just sounds like that's just rudimentary. It's so expensive. How many lawyers have paid you to say that? Are you on retainer with them for marketing? But that's
actually, I pay them. So
well, are you getting a discount for advertising their services to tell them to get a good lawyer out there? Is that what's going on?
Well, and Mike, I want to clarify, it's not just a good lawyer, it's a good startup attorney, and probably in the space that you're in. So, I would interview the attorneys that you're going to be working with and make sure that they have experience working specifically with startups. And when you start talking about a safe, that they have to go research what that is. So yeah, make sure they're a startup attorney.
So lesson number 2 is basically that be aware your cap table says things to people. It's not just a piece of paper that you throw out there like it's just a bunch of numbers. What do you want? So be aware that that people are looking at it. But I think one of the very interesting things, and this is true of most business startups that I believe, is that people try to assume that, well, if I don't talk about it, they won't notice. That is a terrible idea. You go out there. I have a number of business parables. One of them I call Eat the Grasshopper. Anybody wants to know about it, it's funny, it's good. It's a good business parable. It'll stick with you. But the idea is simply tell people the bad news up front and prepare to have the right explanation to do it. It shows you can control the situation, because as a startup, you're always going to have bad things happen to you. Some of them are in your control, some of them are not. It's how you recover that matters, right?
Absolutely. In fact, I'll tell you, as an angel investor, I'm looking for that transparency and the trust, being built with the founder, and especially in the early stages, you're betting on this individual, and if you've seen them, pivot and make hard decisions, that's a positive thing. And so I think you can build that into, the conversation with potential investors.
Wholeheartedly agree. Well, thanks very much, Jeff. Carta, like all of our participants today, we'll have additional content available on the site talking about education materials for those that need to understand their cap table more. We were going to get into some more technical aspects of investment, like structures and other ways in order to maximize your cap table holdings and other things like that. But decided that we would stick with something that was more useful in a 5-minute space. Otherwise, we're not doing quantum theory here in 4 minutes, folks. All right, so next up is Amanda Yogia from Prime Alpha, who just maybe will do some quantum theory with us, but in the social network space. She's a very intelligent woman. I loved talking with her the other day when we were prepping for this, and Prime Alpha does some really interesting stuff from the new age, as it were, of fundraising, right? So you know a lot about the way we are going forward in fundraising. The way it used to be is you had your boys network or your bankers, and they went out and reached it. But what do you do now? Like startups now, if you want to go out and raise money, you're going to crowdsourcing sites, or what are you doing?
So I think digital has completely transformed the fundraising process just overall. So if you think about from the investor's perspective, opportunities are being aggregated for them, right? So it saves them a ton of time. They see more deals, and it increases their access, right? So, and they're getting insight from trends and markets. So they're getting a ton of information thrown at them. And if you think about it from the company's perspective, more visibility, right? They get to reach more people. They could scale the whole process, virtual pitches, data rooms, and you could just share more content, videos, podcasts, thought leadership. But with that comes greater competition. So I think the big question is, how do you kind of make yourself more visible or more elevated than your competition? And that's a big thing.
So how do you? So give me the answer. What's the secret sauce? I mean, you led me there. Now give me the answer.
So after our call, Michael, I kind of outlined kind of 4 things that I'm thinking about. So, we from Prime Alpha, we have our online platform to help with capital raising, but we also have an offline portion of it, because it's a really total multi-channel approach, right? And I think people think like, oh, one thing is going to solve everything for you, and it's not. And anyone who thinks that's not going to raise any capital.
Kind of like a LinkedIn profile. It's not a sufficient thing, but it's a necessary thing.
Exactly. So if you're
Part of
not
the overall
posting, if you're not posting content, putting video on there, things like that, then it's like you just have a page that just sits there stagnant, right? You have to engage. And so if you think about on platform, I think about content. I thought it was so interesting what Kathy and Logan was talking about. So I have a different perspective, just a little twist,
Sure.
which is it's kind of like you have this awesome cake, and I'm going to give you a little bit of tiny teaspoon of it, right? And you're like, I love that. So I want the whole cake, right? So I don't know necessarily people have shorter attention spans. They just have greater, they just have a bigger smorgasbord of food, right? But if they like it, they want to go deep into your company. They want to learn more, right? So you said, I want stats. I want the figures, right? So it's like if I make you a cake with stats and figures, you're going to come in and want more of that.
Right. Well, to be clear, it's not that I love the stats and figures so much as I need to know the science.
Yes.
But yeah, it's equally relevant. And
Right.
I love that point. It's almost like thinking that when you have a platform, extending both of your metaphors, you have a smorgasbord. It's like you've gone to, the Ponderosa, the Golden Nugget. What do they call those?
Carol,
I don't know. I'm just trying to think of the name of a great smorgasbord at Vegas. It's like, the 30-foot long layer of food, and you're expected to pick a few meals out of it. That is a platform. That's the investor these days.
Yeah. So
I
think
have everything available.
Totally. So I think the key is if you think about content, you got to keep it simple. It has to be very easy to understand. So when I was a venture capitalist with Advent, if I didn't understand what someone did in the first paragraph, I chucked it. It's like, I don't understand this at all. Answer the why, the what, the how, what is the opportunity set, and why should the investor care? Really?
Right. You're competing against the broad noise of that entire smorgasbord of the whole thing, right?
So, and then as they engage, you think about, okay, I could give them a video. I could give them a podcast. I could give them a thought leadership piece. How are we changing the healthcare industry with this business? So it's like a very much of a two-step, multi-channel approach to drive engagement. And then the third is, and this is personally one of my favorite things, is when you're building something, think of the give to give mentality. So I'm going to give you education. I'm going to give you insight. I'm going to give you the way we're going to change the world. And then we'll get back, which is, hey, I want to meet you. I want to have that meeting. And then the fourth is what's next? What's the call to action? What's the follow-up and the follow-through?
Because so many people fall on that one, right? It's like, because you've done the work and now you're sitting around and saying, why isn't anybody calling me? But in reality is the call to action is on yourself. You need to make sure that you've established the communication framework and the next steps.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where people really fall short. I literally tell people, if you're not going to follow up, don't even do the meeting, and actually don't be on the platform. But you've got to do the work. And I think that's extremely important. You can't expect one thing to solve everything.
But one thing kind of has to solve anything when you talk about standing out. I'm just going to loop us back around to your first point, is that you have this, broad swath of opportunities out there, and you're expected to stand out from the noise in order to make yourself seen. You're expected to have that perfect first paragraph. And yet, to Logan and Kathy's points, each person might be slightly different in terms of what they think the perfect first paragraph looks like. So now what do we do?
So I always say, be authentic. You have to be authentic to yourself and your value system and what you're doing. For me to try to guess what you want from me is not being authentic. It's not going to get us really anywhere. I might hit it once in a while, but overall, I think you're going to go against the odds.
Got it. I mean, the reality is you can't know what your audience looks like until you meet your audience. And one of the problems we have, this is what I was getting at with one of the problems with the platform, is it's very anonymous. You don't know who your audience is.
Yeah.
And so your point is that when you're going out with the large spread, stay true to yourself. Once you've made the connection, now you can start to try to interact with them in a way that you think is going to get us there. And then finally pull through the rest of your points.
100%. Yeah. You could always massage your message, whether you're talking to an ultra high net worth or a family office or a VC, obviously your conversation is going to slightly change because there's different things, they have different objectives.
Right.
So you have to change your message a little
One
bit.
question I have for you, and this is the last one, we're going to have to move on. One of the answers that people provide is try to be multi-spectrum, like send out a blast of 10 different messages, hoping that you'll stick with those 10 different audience types around. Is that a positive outcome, or do you think you're just is it just a mess?
Yeah. I mean, you're talking about the spray and see if anything sticks to the
Spray
wall.
and pray, yeah.
Yeah. I think that's, it's really, really, I mean, you're trying to be lucky.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think you're lucky, go for it. But you're also might be hurting your image and your brand by doing that. So I always think that you have to have some strategy around it. Like it's extremely important. Yeah. Have a plan, have a strategy.
Make sure that if you're going to do that, make sure that all of your messages at least interlock, right? That they all stay on point, on message, so that someone that sees this paragraph or this point doesn't find it in conflict with ones that you were making earlier.
Yeah. I mean, for any company
that do.
And the most important thing is you have to have a concise message. If you tell someone one thing and you tell them something else, you're done. You're toast.
Right. Excellent point.
Yeah. Consistency.
Well, thanks so much, Amanda. As with all of our speakers, how many times have I said this? But I'm going to say it one last because she's the last in this rapid fire first hour we've got. And you can find more information about all of the things that Prime Alpha does and all the education materials and support for startups that they provide on the website. Don't go there yet. I haven't finished making it yet. But I'm working on it. It'll be done by the Monday, I promise. It's a lot of work to try to get done in a short time, but a lot of the content will be there, and I want you guys to follow this stuff. Yep, they just put their website in. You can check it out. Check them out there directly.
Thanks.
Their website, I guarantee, is working. The UK has a really remarkable tax incentive scheme that they've set up. And what it does is it provides a 30% tax credit back to investors in UK companies, as well as a further waiver of any cap gains tax whatsoever on gains. However, you can still reap capital losses on those investments. Now, what this does is it incentivizes a portfolio strategy of highly volatile early stage IP companies, essentially your companies, folks. Early stage healthcare companies are the number one target for these UK products. Okay. And what the problem is that in order to set up a UK subsidiary is a lot of hoop jumping. There's a reason not a lot of people do it. But we have a great content on the site that I hope you do register. It's called Fundraising in the UK. Take a look. That's one of the few pages that I did get to load up with content immediately. So check it out tonight. And what it is a direct conversation between Nathan and I talking about the requirements needed in order to set up a UK clone. It's not a UK sub. It's actually a clone of your existing company, and then be able to derive investment benefits from a vast pool of capital that's overseas, that's taking advantage of this net. The net between all of the tax incentives are to de-risk investors down to about 38 cents on the dollar. So they're all looking for early stage healthcare companies, folks.